You are not here by accident. Something deep within you brought you to this video at this exact moment in time. And once you finish listening, you'll begin to understand why. Carl Jung once said that the soul doesn't always awaken through light, but rather through wounds. True awakening doesn't necessarily come during times of peace and stillness. It often arrives when something inside you breaks just enough to make you look inward. If you're going through a deep emotional pain right now, you might not fully realize it yet, but that pain didn't come to destroy you. It came to transform you. It is not here as a punishment, but as a catalyst for something bigger. There are clear signs that what you're experiencing is not just suffering. You're going through a spiritual awakening. One of the first signs of this is when the pain you're feeling begins to challenge the beliefs you used to hold as absolute truth. That emotional impact, the one that left you breathless, the wound that still throbs inside of you, it didn't only bring sadness or confusion. It also caused a crack in the way you perceive life. And through that crack, awareness begins to enter. What once seemed unquestionable, what once formed the foundation of your identity, now starts to lose meaning. The beliefs you built your life around begin to crumble, piece by piece. And yes, that collapse might have frightened you. It might have left you feeling lost or empty. But in truth, it was the beginning of something much deeper. It was the start of an internal cleansing. When pain shakes you from the inside, it forces you to confront things you had long avoided. Not because you're weak, but because you're no longer able to maintain a version of yourself that no longer reflects who you are becoming. That internal rupture is not a curse. It's a reconfiguration of your consciousness. It's a signal that your soul is no longer willing to live in unconsciousness. It's ready to awaken, no matter how much it hurts. That moment of rupture, although it may feel like an ending, is actually a rebirth. When pain begins to tear down the mental structures that once held you together, the experience is far from easy. You feel as though you're losing control, as if the ground beneath you is no longer solid. But that loss of control is necessary, because only by falling out of what is familiar can you finally come into contact with what is real. That pain doesn't only take things away from you, it also reveals things. You begin to realize how many decisions you made out of fear, how many relationships you held onto out of need, how many versions of yourself were crafted not for authenticity, but simply to please others or survive. This recognition is uncomfortable, yes, but it is also incredibly freeing. It's in that moment that you start to see clearly what was always there, but you had refused or were unable to see before. The mind will resist because change hurts. The ego will cling to the old, to the safe, to the known. But the soul, quietly and patiently, gives thanks. Because with every mental structure that collapses, a space is created. And in that space, something new begins to bloom. This new version of yourself does not come from comfort. It is born from inner cracking, from the pain you chose not to numb, but to confront, to feel, to pass through. That, although many people may not understand it, is a deeply spiritual act. It is your soul taking the wheel, guiding you forward. And even though the process may feel dark and uncertain, it is profoundly sacred. The second sign begins to manifest when something within you changes, not on the surface, but deep in the core of your being. It's when your sensitivity intensifies, sometimes so subtly that you don't even notice it right away. But gradually, unmistakably, you start feeling more, not just emotionally, but energetically, spiritually. This shift doesn't happen randomly. It often begins in the aftermath of pain. Since that moment when suffering entered your life, something fundamental within you was altered. That pain didn't just change how you think. It awakened your ability to feel with greater depth, with sharper clarity. Suddenly, you find yourself more attuned to your environment, more alert to emotions, energies, and truths that once slipped past you unnoticed. What you used to overlook becomes impossible to ignore. And this isn't by chance. It's one of the clearest ways the soul begins to awaken. Deep emotional pain has the peculiar power to dissolve the mental and emotional filters that once shielded you from the world. It doesn't destroy you. It opens you. It strips away the armor, leaves you raw, exposed, vulnerable, but also profoundly receptive. In that open state, the superficial loses its grip. You no longer get distracted by appearances. You're no longer swayed by hollow words or empty gestures, because now you feel. You feel what resonates and what doesn't. You feel what's real and what's performative. You feel what lives and what is merely pretending to live. This newfound sensitivity may feel uncomfortable at first. It may even hurt. It can make the noise of the world unbearable and the chaos around you overwhelming. But it's also a gateway, a portal to transformation. Because once you're cracked open like that, you no longer move through life out of habit or inertia. You move with intention, with awareness. You begin to inhabit yourself in a new way. You start seeing the world with a depth and intensity that you never knew existed. What once felt flat and one-dimensional now holds layers of meaning. And although this transformation can be painful, it's also profoundly liberating. You begin to live on a different frequency, one that is more authentic, more aligned with your essence. In this new space, emotions are no longer denied or buried. They are honored, listened to. Wounds are no longer hidden away in shame. They are acknowledged and integrated into your being. Pain, once viewed as the enemy, becomes something else entirely. A teacher, a guide. The sensitivity that pain triggered within you wasn't a glitch in the system. It was a silent awakening, a subtle, energetic opening that nudged you to start perceiving the world beyond the surface, beyond what the eyes can see. Where you once reacted impulsively from the ego, you now respond from a place of depth, a place within you that you perhaps never knew existed. You begin to notice that conversations leave a stronger imprint on you. The energy of certain places either lifts you or drains you. Silence begins to speak louder than words. And while this can sometimes be overwhelming, it's actually a clear sign of inner evolution. You're no longer capable of living anesthetized. You can't numb yourself like before. Your soul simply won't allow it. And then something even more profound begins to happen. You realize that the pain no longer just hurts. It changes you. It softens you. It makes you more compassionate, more present, more awake. You begin to see things you once ignored. People you used to surround yourself with suddenly feel out of sync, disconnected. Decisions you once made without questioning now seem foreign, as though they were never truly yours. Paths that felt like obligations are now heavy, lifeless. They lack purpose. And what once seemed solid and secure slowly begins to crumble. Not because you're losing your way, but because you're finally walking awake. That's the real shift. You're not lost. You've just stopped walking in your sleep. And because of that, anything that no longer vibrates in alignment with your truth becomes unbearable to carry. The weight of inauthenticity grows heavier. The need for external validation fades. The urge to pretend, to conform, withers away. Not everyone will understand this version of you, but you no longer seek to be understood. You can't go back to who you were. The pain that cracked you open also opened a door that cannot be closed again. This wasn't a breakdown. It was an expansion, an irreversible expansion. And with that expansion, your pace changes. You can no longer rush through life as you once did. You can't fill your days with noise to avoid the silence, because now silence holds truth. Your body begins to demand more stillness. Your energy cries out for more presence, more listening, more pause. You become selective, not out of arrogance, but out of energetic necessity. You begin to protect your inner space like never before, because now you know how deeply you're affected by what you allow in. You stop tolerating connections that dim your light. You walk away from environments that pull you away from your center, not because you think you're better than others, but because you've learned what it costs you to lose touch with your essence. And after everything you've endured, you are no longer willing to give that up. This new level of sensitivity also unlocks something else, a kind of inner vision. You start to see patterns where there used to be only chaos. You start to sense lessons hidden within the pain. You begin to understand that the very thing that broke you also pointed you toward a more authentic version of yourself. You're no longer the same. The shift might not be visible to others, but you feel it. Deep within you, you know. Because now, you experience life differently. And in that deeper experience, you access a wisdom that was never taught, only remembered. Pain has made you more human, yes, but also more soul, more attuned to the invisible, more grounded in the essential, more loyal to your own truth. You've become someone who feels more, sees more, and lives more, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. The third sign appears quietly, yet profoundly. It happens when you begin to release the version of yourself that once defined you, without having a clear vision of where you're headed. One of the most transformative effects of emotional pain, especially when it serves as a catalyst for awakening, is that it breaks down everything that you no longer are. And it does so without asking for your permission. It doesn't come with a warning, nor does it wait for your readiness. It simply begins. Suddenly, almost without realizing it, you wake up one day and notice that the things that once gave you identity no longer resonate. You feel a deep, unexplainable detachment from the roles you played, the routines you followed, the beliefs you held so tightly, and even the dreams you once chased with passion. These things, people, places, habits, begin to fall away like autumn leaves, making room for something new, something sacred, something unknown. It's not something the mind chooses. It's something the body feels. A quiet but undeniable inner certainty begins to rise. It's as though your entire being finally acknowledges the truth that was waiting patiently beneath the surface, that you can no longer carry what once defined you. Not because it was bad, but because it no longer belongs. You've outgrown it. You've changed. You've evolved. This letting go doesn't mean loss. It means purification. It's not an end. It's an opening. It's space being cleared, not for something random, but for something more aligned with your soul. And yes, even if that something has yet to take shape, even if you find yourself suspended in a mysterious in-between, what you're experiencing is not emptiness. It's the sacred ground of transformation. It's the exact moment when your soul begins to reclaim the space that was once ruled by your ego. Letting go of what once defined you is one of the most silent and courageous acts of awakening. Because there are no guarantees, no clear paths, no external voices reassuring you that you're on the right track. All you have is a burning inner guidance, a whisper of truth that comes not from logic, but from the depth of your soul. And in that inner fire, you begin to see just how many things you are holding on to, not out of love or authenticity, but out of habit, fear, and the desire to be accepted by people or systems that no longer reflect your essence. You start releasing relationships where you can't fully be yourself. You walk away from roles that you fulfilled only out of obligation. You question the image you've built of yourself, one shaped more by trauma and survival than by truth and authenticity. And though it may initially feel like you're losing your identity, a deeper part of you knows that you're finally being set free. You no longer care about being understood by everyone. You care about being honest with yourself. Approval stops being your motivator. Peace becomes your compass. And that shift, that new way of seeing and choosing, is not random. It's the soul maturing. A maturity that doesn't come from age, but from breaking open and refusing to run away from yourself. You may feel lost, yes, confused perhaps, because the old has crumbled and the new has yet to fully form. But this disorientation is not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you're being reborn. You are learning how to move through life with a different kind of energy, one that flows not from the mind, but from the heart, a different center, a different frequency. And even when the world pressures you to define yourself, to explain yourself, to fit into a box again, you choose to remain in the unknown with dignity, because now you understand that the void is not emptiness. The void is the quiet space where what is real begins to emerge. And in that quiet, without even searching, you start to rediscover yourself. Not the version of you shaped by the world, but the version that always existed underneath. The essence you forgot. The you that needs no title, no applause, no validation to feel worthy. You begin to recognize yourself in the calm you once feared, in the stillness you now welcome, in the honesty you no longer suppress. You don't need to impress anymore. You only need to be true. And this shedding of your former identity, it's not escape, it's growth. It's your soul peeling away layers that have already served their purpose. And yes, there may be moments of nostalgia, moments where you remember the person you used to be, the dreams you once had. But right alongside that nostalgia is a new kind of peace, a quiet joy. Because what's coming into your life now isn't external, it's you. It's your essence returning home. It's your energy realigning with your truth. It's your authenticity stepping back into the light. And here's the most important part. You don't need to understand it all. You don't need a detailed plan or perfect clarity. All you need is to trust that inner pull, the one that leads you into the unknown, yet somehow feels more familiar, more honest, more you than anything that's come before. The pain didn't just change you, it purified you. It stripped away the illusions. It burned through the noise, so you could finally remember what you've always been, so you could come home to yourself. And now, all that's left is to walk forward, not with certainty, but with faith, not with fear, but with presence, not as who you were, but as who you truly are. The fourth sign is when you begin to feel a deeper connection with the invisible. It's not something that happens overnight, but rather something that awakens gradually, often after a period of profound emotional pain. You go through something that breaks you, shatters your world, and leaves you with questions you never asked before. And then, something inside you starts to shift, not just emotionally, but energetically, spiritually. It's as if your soul, having passed through suffering, has become more refined, more attuned. You begin to sense things you never noticed before. It's like a veil has been lifted. You become aware of subtle patterns in life, what many call synchronicities. You start seeing how certain people appear exactly when you need them, how messages or signs seem to show up at just the right time. They could be a sentence in a book, a song on the radio, or even a random conversation you overhear. These moments feel too perfectly timed to be random. And while the old version of you might have brushed them off as coincidences, the new you knows better. The pain took away many things from you. It stripped you down, maybe even made you feel lost. But it also did something unexpected. It opened a sacred doorway. Through that doorway, you began to perceive a new kind of language, intuitive, symbolic, silent, yet undeniably real. The kind of language that doesn't shout, it whispers, but its truth is so strong that you can't ignore it. You also start to notice that your emotions are no longer confined to just you. You begin to feel the energy of others. You walk into a room and can sense tension before anyone says a word. You look into someone's eyes and you can feel the weight they're carrying, even if they smile and pretend everything's fine. You know when someone is hiding pain, not because they told you, but because you can feel it in your bones. And the strange part? You didn't study this. You didn't read it in a book. It simply awakened after you broke down. Because that crack in your soul, where the pain entered, also became the space where the light came in. A different kind of light. A new level of consciousness. A heightened sensitivity. A way of experiencing the world that you never had access to before. Now, you don't seek answers the way you used to. You're no longer chasing certainty. What you seek is something far more profound. A sense of inner guidance, of quiet companionship, of a presence that transcends what your hands can touch and your eyes can see. You probably don't tell many people about this, not because it's a secret, but because you know that words will never do it justice. This experience is deeply intimate. It happens in the quiet moments when your mind finally silences and your soul begins to listen. And what it hears doesn't always have a shape or form, but it always carries truth. A kind of truth that doesn't need proof because it resonates so deeply that you simply know it's real. You begin to trust your intuition in a way you never have before. Not because you can explain why you feel certain things or why you just know something is right or wrong, but because ignoring that inner knowing is no longer an option. Every time you follow that intuitive pull, life responds. Life confirms it. Again and again, it reminds you that you are not alone, that something greater is walking alongside you, guiding your steps in ways you can't fully understand. This connection doesn't make you special. It makes you aware. It makes you present. And with that presence, your entire way of living begins to transform. You no longer search outside yourself for what you've already discovered within. You stop desperately looking for signs because you've become the kind of person who's naturally receptive to them. And in that openness, the answers come, not with force, but with grace. You begin to recognize that there's an invisible thread tying everything together, that every event, even the painful ones, had a place in the grand design, that every heartbreak, every loss, every fall was pushing you closer to the person you were always meant to become: more connected, more awake, more willing to live from your soul rather than your fear. And that is one of the clearest signs of spiritual awakening. You can no longer live disconnected from the invisible realms because they now live inside you. Over time, this connection becomes your refuge, not a place to hide, but a place that holds you steady when the world outside begins to tremble. It's like tuning in to an inner frequency, a vibration that soothes you, guides you, reminds you of who you are. And from that place, you begin to live. Quietly, intuitively, authentically. You become more present in the small moments, more attuned to subtle signs, more open to receiving what cannot be predicted or controlled, but can absolutely be felt. You stop forcing the path. You begin to move with what resonates, and you gently let go of what drifts away, without needing to know why. Because now, you trust that there is a greater order at play, one that doesn't always make sense to the mind, but speaks deeply to the soul. And something powerful begins to happen in that trust. Your energy shifts. And as your energy changes, so does everything you attract. Life starts to meet you where you are. When you are aligned with the invisible, the visible begins to organize itself around that alignment. You no longer need predictions, or validation, or guarantees. All you need is that inner voice you've come to recognize as your own. That gentle whisper that has been with you ever since pain cracked you open. That presence that now walks with you, silently, steadily, carrying you closer and closer to your true purpose. And the fifth sign is this: you've stopped fighting what you feel, and you've finally started to listen. When emotional pain becomes the beginning of your awakening, one of the most profound shifts is that you let go of resistance. You stop pretending that everything is fine. You no longer need to suppress the ache within you or keep up the illusion of being strong, composed, and untouched by pain. Instead, you allow yourself to feel, truly feel, without fear. You no longer run from your emotions, numb them, or try to bury them under layers of distraction or false strength. You begin to let them move through you, to pass through your body like a wave, unfiltered and unjudged. And while this might seem fragile from the outside, it is, in truth, one of the most courageous acts of the soul. Because it is only when you stop fighting your emotions that real transformation begins, not from a place of control, but from a space of deep understanding and presence. This kind of surrender is not resignation. It is spiritual maturity. It is the quiet recognition that pain is not your enemy, but your teacher. It's the messenger that arrives when your soul is ready to hear something essential. And once you begin to listen to this messenger, it no longer needs to scream. It begins to speak softly, with clarity, and you begin to understand, not just intellectually, but deeply, in your bones, in your breath, in the stillness of your being. That understanding changes everything, because when you stop fighting what you feel, you stop splitting yourself into fragments. You no longer have a part of you trying to move forward while another part is left behind, wounded and ignored. Now all of you becomes presence. Now all of you comes home. Allowing yourself to feel doesn't mean you'll remain trapped in the pain. It means you begin to acknowledge that every emotion carries a message, a truth. And when you honor that truth, the emotion no longer needs to repeat itself. Anger stops being something you need to control. It becomes something you need to understand. Sadness stops being a weakness. It becomes the cleansing water that washes away everything that no longer serves you. Loneliness stops feeling like punishment. Instead, it becomes a sacred space, a quiet temple within, where you finally begin to hear your own voice, where your essence speaks. And when you choose to live like this again and again, you begin to move from a different place, from an inner honesty that doesn't seek perfection, but seeks alignment, coherence. You no longer feel the urge to explain what you're feeling, or to justify it, or hide it. You simply live in it, embody it. And in that act of embodiment, something deep within you is set free. Because listening to what you feel is, in truth, listening to your soul. And when that happens, awakening stops being a distant spiritual idea and becomes an embodied experience. It becomes a way of living, with an open heart, with a receptive body, and with an awakened soul. Listening to your emotions means you no longer have to break yourself apart just to be accepted. You stop forcing yourself to keep going when your inner world is asking for stillness. You stop repressing what moves through you just to appear strong. You begin to live in alignment with your inner world. And though this may not be visible to others, it brings you back to yourself. You no longer need anyone else to validate your process, because the deepest validation arises from the silence within you. The silence that arrives when you finally stop betraying yourself, when you finally say, "This is what I feel, and that's okay. This is who I am right now, and that too is valid." And from that place, something entirely new is born. A quiet strength, a softness that stands firm, a self no longer built from defense, but from integration. Because when you listen to what you feel, you stop fighting your own story. And when the battle ends, healing begins, not with words, but with presence. Pain no longer defines you. It transforms you. It becomes the space in which your consciousness expands, where every part of who you are is allowed to exist. You no longer have to choose between your light and your shadow, because you now understand that both are essential to your awakening. You've stopped fighting yourself. And that, perhaps, is the greatest act of love you can offer your soul. Thank you for being here. If, while listening to these words, you felt something move inside you, don't ignore it. It's not random. It's not a coincidence. It's your soul recognizing itself. It's a reminder that you are not broken. You are awakening. Carl Jung once said that the encounter with oneself often begins with pain, because only through darkness do we truly learn to see the light. And if you are in that place right now, if you're walking through that darkness, you are not alone. You are standing at the threshold of a transformation that goes far beyond what can be seen or explained. You don't need to have all the answers. You only need to follow the thread of truth that is beginning to weave itself through your being. Follow it with patience. Follow it with awareness. And know, deep in your heart, that pain, when listened to, becomes wisdom. If this message has resonated with your journey, if it has put words to something you've been quietly feeling inside, I invite you to continue walking this path with me. Keep exploring. Keep returning to yourself with the calm, the strength, and the depth that only an awakened soul knows. Thank you for being. Thank you for existing. You're not here by coincidence. Something deep within you led you to this video at this very moment, and by the time it ends, you'll understand why. The awakening of the inner archetype is not something that can be forced or rushed. It's a silent and profound process, an invitation from the soul to remember its true essence, to reconnect with that primordial energy that has always been present within you, lying dormant until now. Even if it manifests in subtle ways, there are unmistakable signs that this awakening has already begun. One of the first is the sense that an internal force has started to guide you, even if you can't describe it with words. It's not just an ordinary intuition. It's a powerful feeling, as if something ancient and wise inside you has taken the reins of your life, influencing your choices with a strength that feels both familiar and mysterious. You no longer make decisions solely based on logic or the expectations of others. Instead, you're moved by a deeper calling that pulls you toward becoming more authentically yourself. This inner force doesn't require external justification. It expresses itself as a quiet certainty, as a compass that points the way even in the midst of confusion. Your life begins to align with patterns you hadn't noticed before. Symbols, synchronicities, encounters. They start appearing, resonating in a way that goes beyond reason or intellect. And though you may not fully understand why you're drawn to certain paths or people, something inside you knows it's not a coincidence. It's your inner archetype surfacing, claiming its rightful space in your daily existence. This inner energy begins to shape not just your thoughts, but also your language, the way you walk, the way you observe the world, the way you now make choices you would have previously avoided. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you have always been at your core. And this remembering doesn't come as a mental image. It's a visceral certainty, one that anchors itself in your body, in your voice, in the way you remain present without the need to conform. You begin to sense that something inside you is falling into place, as if all the scattered pieces are finally aligning, even if you can't yet explain why. You're no longer acting out of a desire to please or to fulfill inherited expectations. Now, your gestures, your decisions, even your silences respond to a force that doesn't come from the outside, but from the deepest part of your soul. You also start noticing that this force becomes especially active in moments of tension, of crisis, of transformation. And instead of dragging you down, it holds you up. It reminds you of what you've always carried within, what you came here to embody, and what you can no longer ignore. Your energy begins to gain direction, even if the destination isn't entirely clear. But that doesn't scare you. For the first time, you feel like you're walking toward yourself. And as you continue along this path, that internal energy becomes increasingly recognizable. Not because the world around you changes, but because you begin to see it more clearly in your everyday life, in the way you stand tall when faced with tough decisions, in how you say no without guilt, in how you hold on to your truth without needing to explain it. You're no longer seeking validation in anyone else's eyes, because that validation has started to grow from within, not as inflated ego, but as deep, unwavering integrity. You realize there's a part of you that was never meant to be learned, only remembered. And that memory doesn't come from the mind, it comes from the soul. You begin to surround yourself with people, places, and things that nourish that energy in you. It's as if your external world is rearranging itself so you can finally become who you were meant to be. You lose interest in meaningless conversations and roles that never truly fit you. Your energy no longer wants to just survive. It wants to express itself, to expand, to live fully. And this is the moment when your inner archetype not only awakens, it begins to integrate into your life. It's no longer just an abstract concept. It becomes a living force, one that urges you to speak more honestly, to move with more intention, and to live with more coherence. And that impulse can no longer be silenced. Because once your inner archetype awakens, everything that doesn't align with it begins to dissolve. Another sign of this awakening is a shift in your attention. You start to notice symbols, images, and messages that you used to overlook. This is not random. The language of the archetype isn't literal. It's symbolic, intuitive, profound. You begin to see certain numbers, words, shapes, or recurring dreams. They don't appear as superstition, but as real manifestations of what's moving within you. Your unconscious mind, which once operated quietly in the background, begins to communicate with you through signs that only you can truly interpret. You may find yourself suddenly drawn to certain animals, to ancient myths, or to archetypal figures like the wise elder, the healer, the guide, the warrior, or the inner lover. And it's not about outward admiration or wanting to become something you're not. It's something far deeper. It's an inner recognition, an echo from within that tells you this isn't new. It's not something you have to chase or become. It's something you already are. And now you're remembering it. A memory awakening, not from your mind, but from your soul. Symbols begin to appear in your dreams, strange yet familiar images that seem to carry a message. Unexpected visions emerge during meditation, or simple, seemingly random moments throughout the day align perfectly to show you something vital. And even if no one else sees it, you feel it deep in your bones. It's real, not necessarily in the visible world, but in the energetic one, in the emotional layers that transform you from the inside out. These symbols don't ask for logic. They ask for presence, for trust, for the kind of knowing that doesn't need to be proven, because it already is. You start to realize that your life isn't just a chain of random events. It's a vast and intricate web of deep meanings, a sacred language that you're only now beginning to decode. And with every moment of insight, that hidden script doesn't tell you who you should become. It reveals who you've always been, at the core of your sacred essence. It's like learning to read a map you didn't know you were carrying, and once you begin, everything changes. The ordinary starts to speak in extraordinary ways. Your daily life, once filled with routine and automatic behaviors, becomes infused with meaning. You no longer crave grand answers, because every small sign, every subtle shift, brings a forgotten part of you back to life, a long-lost emotion, a hidden strength, a truth that had waited in silence for years just to be named. This symbolic connection doesn't just make you more aware, it makes you more open. Your intuition sharpens, your inner compass begins to point more clearly. You no longer just feel, you understand, on a much deeper level, the things you once overlooked. You begin to see that certain emotions, cycles, and people didn't enter your life by accident. Each one is a mirror, reflecting some part of you that longs to be seen, acknowledged, and understood. And with that realization, your outer reality becomes a reflection of your inner evolution. Not because the world has changed, but because your way of seeing it has. You're now perceiving it from a different place, a sacred place, where everything communicates, where even the most subtle detail becomes a signpost guiding you toward a more complete version of yourself. From this heightened awareness, discomfort no longer feels like something to escape. Instead, you see it for what it truly is, a message in disguise, a fragment of your archetype waiting to be embodied. And that willingness to look with different eyes, to feel instead of flee, is the clearest sign that a deep wisdom is awakening within you. Not the kind learned through books or teachings, but a wisdom born of the soul, nurtured by experience. This kind of wisdom doesn't arrive as a lightning bolt of sudden clarity. It rises slowly, quietly, expanding your awareness and transforming the way you experience everything. What once felt like conflict now becomes an invitation to explore the parts of yourself that react, to question the origins of your fears, to sit with emotions you used to run from. Because now you understand. Each emotion holds a key that opens a door to something greater, something that has always lived within you. And gradually, you become more intimate with yourself, not through ideas or philosophies, but through the daily practice of presence, of sitting with yourself in silence, not to escape, but to listen, to truly hear what's moving in your deepest layers. Your internal dialogue begins to shift. You no longer speak to yourself with doubt or blame. You speak with care, like someone who knows they're on a sacred journey, someone who doesn't need to have it all figured out, but can no longer afford to keep ignoring their truth. You start to see that the symbols don't just come in dreams or signs from the universe. They appear in your reactions, your repeated words, the patterns you project onto others. What you criticize, what you admire, what you fear or avoid, all of it reveals your inner world more than the external one. And instead of feeling overwhelmed by this realization, you feel empowered, because now you know you have the tools to transform what once felt fixed and immovable. Even your life cycles become clearer. You begin to notice how certain patterns repeat, not as punishment, but as opportunities to integrate unresolved parts of yourself. You become aware of the exact moment when the old version of you wants to take control again. But this time, something's different. You don't react automatically. This time, you pause, you breathe, you choose differently. You choose from a deeper place, a place where your archetype is not a concept, but a living force within you. It structures your choices, sustains your path, and gives shape to your inner world. And with this connection, your experience of life becomes richer. You're no longer trapped at the surface. You dive into the depths, navigating the hidden language of the essential. And you do it with the calm clarity of someone who no longer needs to escape, because you've begun to recognize yourself in the very things you once avoided. The third sign appears when something deep within you begins to shift, when your identity starts to shed the layers of roles, personas, and masks that no longer align with your true essence. This transformation isn't superficial, and it certainly isn't a fleeting act of rebellion. It's not about changing your style or updating your appearance. It's a profound internal purification, a deep and sometimes unsettling process where you begin to see, perhaps for the first time, that much of what you believed yourself to be wasn't really you. It becomes painfully clear that many aspects of your personality were merely adaptations, constructs designed to make you feel safe, accepted, validated. You had unconsciously created characters, molded versions of yourself, just to fit in, to avoid rejection, to gain approval, or simply to survive in a world that demands conformity. But something inside you stirs. Something ancient and wise begins to wake up. When your inner archetype starts to awaken, these roles, however useful they once were, can no longer sustain themselves. Not because they are inherently wrong or bad, but because they've become too limited, too small to hold the immense energy that is now beginning to surge through your being. Suddenly, pretending becomes unbearable. You can no longer feign interest in things that don't resonate with your soul. The illusion starts to dissolve. Relationships that once felt comfortable or even necessary begin to feel hollow. You realize that you can't keep walking paths your spirit never chose, even if you once fought hard to be on them. What once looked like success now feels empty, void of meaning. And what you once avoided, out of fear, uncertainty, or conditioning, now draws you in with a quiet but undeniable force. This detachment isn't always graceful. In fact, it can feel like mourning. Letting go of masks and identities that you wore for years can feel like losing pieces of yourself. But in truth, you're not losing anything essential. You're returning. You're being stripped down to your core, to the raw and unchangeable part of you that cannot be bargained with or diluted. It's not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. You're allowing everything that distracted you from your inner truth to fall away. And as it does, a more real, more coherent version of yourself begins to emerge. You start to see yourself differently, not through the lens of what you do or achieve, but through the energy you carry, through the silent truth you radiate in your presence, your gestures, your choices. Even if others don't understand this change, you feel it clearly. It's a clarity that doesn't come from intellectual analysis. It comes from having listened to yourself for so long that ignoring your truth is no longer an option. You feel it in your bones. You feel it in your breath. You've come to know yourself too intimately to keep pretending. Letting go of these old roles gives you a kind of freedom you didn't even know was possible. It's not the freedom to do whatever you want without consequence. It's the freedom of walking without the heavy burden of pleasing an outdated image of yourself. You no longer need to live up to expectations that never really fit you in the first place. You discover you can be firm without being harsh, vulnerable without feeling exposed, authentic without fearing loss, because your sense of belonging no longer depends on others' approval, but on your inner alignment. Your energy stops scattering between what you feel and what you do. You start moving from a place of deep stillness, yet incredible power. The need to control, to manipulate outcomes, to force understanding. All of it begins to fade. You're no longer acting to be accepted. You're simply being. And this being doesn't require explanation. It is so grounded in truth that anything which doesn't align with it naturally falls away. Even your relationship with discomfort transforms. In the past, discomfort was something to run from. It threatened the masks you wore. But now, you lean into it. You welcome it, because you understand that discomfort is a sacred messenger. It reveals where you're still holding back, where you're still attached to outdated versions of yourself. And in that awareness, you allow yourself to grieve, not with attachment, but with reverence. You honor who you once were without clinging to it, because now there is space, real space, for a fuller, deeper presence to live through you. Life becomes simpler, yet more meaningful. There's less noise, but more depth. You no longer feel the need to decorate your achievements or hide your healing. You feel at home in your process, at peace with your pace, aligned with your path. You understand now that the true power of the archetype awakening within you does not lie in what you achieve. It lies in what you embody. And you have begun to embody your truth. And once you do that, the need to look outside yourself for validation disappears. You're no longer searching for figures to imitate. You're seeking resonance. You're drawn to depth. You're guided by connections that are rooted in authenticity, not obligation. Living from this deeper identity makes you more selective about what you consume, what you share, what you allow into your energetic field. You stop explaining yourself to those who aren't willing to understand. You stop trying to be seen by people who only recognize the surface, because your worth no longer hinges on being understood by everyone. It's now grounded in being honest with yourself. And this changes the way you relate to others, not from a place of need, but from presence, not from a mask, but from the frequency you emit simply by being real. That frequency begins to shape a new reality around you. You attract people who vibrate at the same depth. You find yourself in spaces where you can finally breathe without performing. You receive opportunities that don't feel like obligations. They feel like answers. Answers from the universe, responding to your authenticity. And you also realize something profound. You're no longer available for what drains you, not because you reject it, not because you judge it, but because you love yourself enough to choose clarity. And that clarity brings peace. A peace that can't be bargained for, because you've earned it. You earned it by releasing everything that distanced you from yourself. Your silence now speaks louder than words. It doesn't need to convince. It only needs to be. And in that being, something sacred is felt, something ancient, something that was always there, but buried. It's not an idealized version of yourself. It's your essence, stripped of interference. It's your archetype in motion. It's your soul, finally in coherence. The fourth sign. You begin to experience a profound reconnection with parts of yourself that were never truly gone, just hidden, buried beneath layers of fear, conditioning, and forgetfulness. These are not qualities you're newly acquiring, but pieces of your essence that had been silenced, shamed, or simply overlooked. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you've always been at your core. Suddenly, traits you once saw as flaws, your intensity, your deep sensitivity, your unconventional perspective, begin to rise to the surface again, not as burdens, but as gifts. You start to realize that your strength was never arrogance, it was clarity. Your emotional depth was never weakness, it was empathy. And your unique way of seeing the world, once mistaken for madness, was simply a heightened form of perception, a different kind of wisdom that doesn't conform to the norm, but transcends it. This remembrance doesn't come from your logical mind. It comes from your soul. It emerges from that sacred space within you where your archetype has always resided, dormant, but never absent, waiting patiently to be reawakened. This awakening doesn't construct something new. Rather, it activates what has always been. It stirs your natural talents, your intuitive knowing, your sacred way of being a bridge between the invisible and the visible, the spiritual and the material. You begin to feel more whole, not because everything in your life is suddenly perfect, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. You stop resisting your own essence. The internal battle softens, and in its place, a previously unknown peace begins to bloom. It's a peace that doesn't come from external circumstances, but from finally inhabiting your entire being without fragmenting yourself. The emotions that used to overwhelm you now serve as teachers. The impulses you once suppressed now sharpen into precise intuition. That ache inside you to express, to create, to speak your truth. It no longer stems from fear or anxiety. It becomes a sacred urgency, a deep calling that you can no longer ignore. You begin to feel an undeniable need to create, to communicate, to give form to what your soul feels. because now you understand. This is also part of your purpose. Even if you're still on the journey, you come to a beautiful realization. You don't need to evolve into some better version of yourself. You only need to continue making space for that inner voice, that presence within you that already knows who you are, why you're here, and that finally, at last, has been given permission to bloom. And when this part of you begins to bloom, it doesn't do so with noise or with the need to be seen. It blooms in silence, in quiet determination, the way truth always does. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth, because you see now that your worth has always been there, waiting for you to stop hiding it, waiting for you to stop apologizing for it, waiting for the moment when you'd allow it to speak freely through your every word and action. What you once repressed in order to fit in, you now honor as the very essence of what makes you unique. Your creativity, your emotional intensity, your capacity to sense what others cannot. All the things you tried to silence so you wouldn't be too much now rise in you like sacred flames. They're not accessories. They're not burdens. They're sacred tools, alive and vibrant, meant to guide you back to your archetypal energy. This energy isn't interested in labels. It doesn't obey formulas or expectations. It is wise, ancient, sometimes even contradictory, but always real, always true. And slowly, you begin to live from that place with less fear, with more surrender. A quiet confidence takes root in you, one that no longer depends on being validated by others. You stop defining yourself by how others see you. You begin to define yourself by what you are able to hold within, by your own inner presence, your own unwavering truth. This gives you a deep, grounded stability, not because everything in your life is under control, but because you've learned to trust your own roots. You've learned to lean into that inner fire that never goes out, even when the outside world tries to dim it. You begin to understand that you don't have to be in perfect balance all the time in order to be in alignment. Because living from your archetype doesn't mean being enlightened. It means being awake. And being awake means embracing both your darkness and your light. It means holding space for your chaos as much as your order. Because everything within you has a role. Every part of you, even the ones you once rejected, are now seen for what they truly are, necessary components of your awakening. And as you integrate them, your energy expands, not outward into the world in search of approval, but inward into yourself, into the sacred soil of your being. And from that deep inner space, a new reality begins to take shape. That new reality isn't something you fabricate. It's not built on the expectations of others. It is a natural manifestation of your energy, now unified, no longer torn between roles and masks. You are no longer trapped between what the world wants from you and what your soul longs to express. You now act from a single place, your truth. And when your truth becomes the foundation of your choices, even the smallest decision begins to carry a new weight, a new clarity. You no longer say yes to what steals your peace. You no longer choose from a place of lack or desperation. You've learned the sacred art of waiting, not out of fear, but out of knowing who you are. And once you recognize yourself, you no longer sell yourself short. You no longer rush. You no longer hide. Your way of moving through life becomes more steady, more intentional, more sacred. Because when your inner archetype awakens, everything you touch begins to vibrate differently. Your words carry new power. Your gaze holds more presence. Even your silence speaks louder than any speech. And this shift, though not always noticed by others, can be felt. It's felt in the rooms you enter. It's felt in the people who gravitate toward you. It's felt in the way everything around you seems to move, with more harmony, as if life itself finally recognizes that you've returned to your center, to your essence, to the exact point where everything can grow without distortion. You're no longer playing a role. You're no longer trying to become someone. You're simply remembering who you've always been. And as you remember, your soul breathes more freely, more lightly, more truthfully. And the fifth sign appears when your entire perception of purpose shifts. It no longer feels like something external you need to chase. Instead, it becomes something you embody. In the past, your purpose may have seemed like a distant goal, something to be discovered, searched for, or even achieved through effort and perseverance. You may have believed you needed to follow certain steps, meet specific expectations, or reach an ideal state before you could truly live in alignment with it. But now, something profound has changed within you. From the moment your inner archetype awakens, you begin to realize a powerful truth. Purpose isn't something you do. It's something you are. It's not a career, a destination, or a role to play. It's the natural expression of your most authentic self. And when you allow yourself to simply be, without masks, without filters, without self-denial, what you came here to do begins to manifest effortlessly. Your mere presence begins to carry weight and meaning. Existential questions no longer paralyze you the way they once did. And it's not because you suddenly have all the answers. It's because you've stopped depending on external formulas. You no longer need someone to hand you a roadmap. You've realized that your path is unlike any other, that your unique expression is sacred. Every experience, every wound, every moment, even the ones that once felt senseless or painful, was part of a design your soul had to break free from in order to step fully into the space that belongs to you. Now, the meaning of your life isn't measured by visible results or accomplishments. Instead, it's reflected in what awakens inside you and inside others, simply through your presence. You're no longer obsessed with doing something extraordinary. You're more concerned with living each moment from a place of depth and truth. You've begun to understand that even the simplest act becomes sacred when it flows from authenticity. Something within you no longer allows you to live on autopilot. What you once tolerated without question now feels unbearably heavy. Activities that lack soul, words spoken without intention, routines that feel empty, all of it drains you more than any physical effort. Because once your inner archetype has awakened, it won't let you fall asleep again. It won't let you forget who you truly are or why you're here. Even if the world continues spinning in its usual rhythm, you've stopped running alongside it. You've slowed down. You're no longer trying to keep up. Instead, you're walking in step with your soul, at its pace, in its cadence, and in its truth. And that way of walking, even though it looks different from what others may expect, is the only one that can lead you to a life that truly belongs to you. And when you begin to live a life that truly belongs to you, you feel something change. Everything you do carries a new energy. You're no longer driven by impulse or obligation. You move with intention, from resonance. Every action comes from a quiet, clear space within. A space that no longer holds confusion or noise, only direction. You come to understand that purpose is not some grand event waiting to happen. It's present in every choice you make that reflects your essence. It's in every moment you choose peace over approval, Every time you choose silence over reaction. Every time you refuse to betray yourself, even if it means disappointing others' expectations of you. That inner alignment becomes your new measure of success. You no longer need achievements to feel worthy. You no longer need recognition to feel on the right path. Your compass is now invisible to the eyes of the world, but it's unwaveringly clear to your soul. Things that once seemed small now feel significant. A sincere gesture, a moment of deep presence, an encounter that stirs something within. All of it takes on a sacred weight, one you used to reserve only for the extraordinary. This is one of the clearest signs that your inner archetype is not only awake, it has become fully embodied. You're no longer seeking meaning in distant places. You're planting it here and now, with every step you take in alignment, with every word that comes from your center, with every day you choose not to forget who you are. That steady, quiet, and consistent decision to be true to yourself is the most real manifestation of your purpose. It doesn't require applause or validation. You feel it in your body. You sense it in your breath. In the calm that remains, even when the world outside is chaotic. You realize that life is no longer about finding the path, but about walking it with loyalty to yourself, holding your truth, even when it isn't the most popular or the easiest. And that's where the extraordinary happens, not like a sudden explosion or dramatic change, but like a soft, elegant alignment between your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. Your energy is no longer scattered. Your mind becomes quiet. Your presence becomes deeper and more grounded. You stop pushing life to happen. Things begin to flow, naturally, organically, with the exact rhythm your soul has always needed. Even your relationship with time transforms. You stop chasing. You stop rushing. You begin to receive, allowing things to come when you are ready, not when the world demands them. This shift in frequency pulls you away from burnout. It frees you from the exhausting pressure to prove yourself. It gives you the serenity to simply be, to live, to feel, to create, from a place of truth. This is how purpose stops being a goal and becomes a way of inhabiting the world. And although the path will still bring its challenges, you no longer get lost in them. Because now, you know exactly where everything begins to make sense. Inside of you. If this message resonates with something deep within, it's because that inner archetype has already started to awaken. You don't have to do anything dramatic to be worthy of this. You simply have to allow yourself to be who you truly are, with everything that entails, with everything it liberates. Remember, you're not discovering something new. You're returning to what is essential. And that return is the most powerful spiritual act there is. Don't rush. Don't force. Your truth has no urgency, but it does have direction. And if this message has lit something within you, if it has walked beside you in this moment of your journey, then keep exploring with us. Keep deepening the path of awakening, of soul, of consciousness, of true transformation. Because the truth already lives inside you. It's not lost. It's simply waiting to be lived. You're not here by chance. Something deep within you led you to this video at this very moment. And once you've reached the end, you'll understand why. There are moments in life when you feel a presence nearby, even though no one is physically around you. A soft warmth in your chest, a chill that isn't from the cold, a sudden wave of peace in the middle of chaos. You don't look for it. You don't try to explain it, but it's there. as if someone is silently watching over you from a realm beyond your sight. It doesn't always come with signs you can touch or name, but when your soul begins to awaken, this presence starts revealing itself in subtle ways, as if it's been patiently waiting for the exact moment to make itself known. The first sign appears when you start to notice small synchronicities that repeat themselves with no logical explanation. You see the same numbers over and over again. Mirror hours, repeating sequences. You receive messages at the perfect moment. Lyrics from songs speak directly to your heart, as if written just for you. And even if you try to ignore it, deep down, a part of you knows these aren't mere coincidences. They're a form of communication. This isn't superstition or fantasy. It's an energetic language, one that doesn't rely on words, but on frequencies. For those who are awake, those frequencies are unmistakable, clear, precise. Your spiritual angel doesn't shout, it whispers. And to hear that whisper, you don't need long prayers or elaborate rituals. What you need is presence, awareness, an openness to receive. Because the realm in which your angel moves is not one of words, it is one of intuition. And when your energy begins to align with theirs, the connection becomes stronger, more frequent, more natural. That's when you begin to understand that you're not imagining things. You're starting to remember. You don't need to see wings or hear a voice to know it's there. Your body senses it before your mind can understand. There's a lightness in the atmosphere, a sweetness that doesn't come from anything outside of you, a feeling of companionship that doesn't require physical presence. It's as if something wraps around you with invisible tenderness, a loving energy that asks for nothing in return, but simply wishes to be with you. And that feeling doesn't always come when everything is calm. Sometimes it shows up in the middle of confusion, at a moment of surrender, when you don't know what else to do. And suddenly, for reasons you can't explain, you feel that everything is going to be okay, even though nothing external has changed. That's not coincidence. That's an energetic intervention, a subtle way of saying, you're not alone. Keep going. Often, this communication comes in the form of gentle but persistent intuitions, a thought that appears out of nowhere, a silent warning that urges you to change direction, a sudden impulse that leads you exactly to where you need to be. These aren't ordinary thoughts. They're messages encoded in sensation, translated through your inner perception. Your angel doesn't interrupt your journey. It walks beside you, shining light. And when it communicates, it does so in a way that only you can recognize, because that connection is unique, intimate, sacred. There are moments when you feel inexplicably protected, as if something invisible has stepped between you and whatever could have harmed you. A sudden change in direction. A decision made for no apparent reason that turned out to be exactly what was needed. These things aren't simple coincidences. They're subtle interventions, guided from a realm that sees far beyond what your eyes can perceive. And all of it happens not because you ask, but because you allow it. Because without realizing it, your energy has opened itself to the invisible. And that opening is enough for communication to begin. Not as an external voice imposing itself on you, but as a familiar presence that has always been there. The only difference is, now you're finally beginning to hear it. And that hearing doesn't happen through your ears. It happens in your body, in your chest, in the quiet way a soft certainty settles into your being without warning. You don't need to be in deep meditation to feel it. It can happen while walking, doing something mundane, or even in the midst of one of your hardest moments. Because spiritual angels don't only show up when everything is peaceful. They appear exactly when you need them most, without you having to ask. Have you noticed how certain decisions that once filled you with doubt now feel clearer? As if a wiser, quieter part of yourself is guiding you without explanations. That's part of your angel's language. It doesn't give you reasons, it gives you direction. And you follow that direction not because you understand it, but because it feels undeniably true. Sometimes there are even physical sensations, unexpected yet gentle. A light pressure in your chest, a warmth across your back, a breeze where there is no wind. And though your mind searches for explanations, your soul already knows. It's being touched by something that doesn't belong to this world, but has chosen to be here with you in this one. Your spiritual angel isn't here to save you. It's here to remind you of your strength, to walk beside you, not to carry your weight. And each time it communicates, it's not to give you answers, but to help you remember that the answers have always been within you. This guidance does not control, it supports. It doesn't interfere with your choices. It illuminates the paths your soul is already ready to walk. And when you acknowledge this, when you stop doubting this connection, the relationship becomes clearer, more constant, more alive. Because the spiritual world doesn't require proof. It requires openness. And you, deep down, have already begun to open. The second sign is when you begin to receive repetitive symbolic messages that resonate with you in a deeply personal and emotional way. These are not isolated coincidences that randomly appear in your life. They are patterns, precise and persistent, echoing through your experiences so clearly that something inside you knows they have meaning. You start seeing the same word in different places. You dream of an image and then encounter it in real life. Or certain animals cross your path during key moments. Numbers appear again and again with uncanny precision, to the point where calling them coincidences no longer feels honest. These signs aren't coming from the outside in the way we usually think. They move through a subtle channel, a spiritual current that your guardian angel uses to reach you. This presence doesn't impose or interrupt your journey, but walks alongside it, offering signs and synchronicities to accompany you. You might not always grasp their full meaning in the moment, but you feel them. And that feeling is enough. Your soul recognizes a more ancient language, one that doesn't rely on logic, but on vibration, on energy, on intuition. Sometimes it's a single word, overheard at just the right moment, that strikes you deep within, as if the universe whispered it only to you. Other times, it's a phrase that finds you when you're on the verge of giving up, or a book, a song, or a number that appears just when you most needed confirmation of something your heart already knew. These aren't coincidences, they're communication. Your spiritual guide is speaking through your surroundings. What once seemed ordinary now becomes sacred. Everyday life becomes a vehicle for the divine. And as you grow more present, more connected with the unseen world, you begin to notice those signals, not with surprise, but with gratitude. You no longer need validation from others. You just know. You understand, without a doubt, that you're being guided, that those small, silent signs aren't meant to amuse or distract you, but to remind you that a loving force is with you, walking beside you, communicating in symbols, because symbols are the language of the soul. Over time, you stop trying to analyze every message with your rational mind. It's no longer about decoding each symbol like a puzzle. The purpose of these signs isn't to give you quick answers. It's to awaken something within you. A forgotten memory, a dormant sensitivity, a quiet certainty that begins to grow even without explanation. The message isn't just in the symbol, it's in the way it resonates in you, in the way you pause when you notice it, in how your body reacts, in how something within you goes still for a brief moment, as if that symbol touched a hidden string that hadn't vibrated in years. These repetitions aren't for entertainment. They are anchors, anchors to help you remember that you are seen, that you are being watched over from a plane of pure love. This guidance is constantly at work, hidden within what appears to be the ordinary. When your awareness becomes more open and receptive, randomness begins to fade. Everything transforms into a potential message. Anything can become a sign. In those moments, your relationship with reality begins to shift. You no longer see the world as a random, disconnected place, but as a symbolic field, where spirit communicates through the subtle, through the invisible, through the things you used to overlook. It's a conversation without a voice, but full of meaning. A conversation that occurs every time your attention aligns with your energetic perception. Your angel isn't testing you. It's reminding you how to feel beyond what is obvious. And when you respond to those signs with presence, when you allow yourself to believe in what resonates even without visible proof, the connection deepens. The symbol stops being an isolated event. It becomes a confirmation. And you stop being a mere observer. You become an active participant in the dialogue, an awakened soul, ready to receive what once went unnoticed. Third sign. You begin to experience a sudden, inexplicable peace at the exact moments when everything around you suggests you should feel the opposite. You're going through something difficult. Maybe you're facing uncertainty, tension, emotional pain, or the weight of an unresolved situation. And suddenly, without any logical explanation, something inside you quiets down. It's not because things have magically worked out on the outside, but because something profound has shifted within you. That peace you're feeling, it's not emotional in nature. It's not the result of some mental trick, positive thinking, or a strategy you applied. It's something much deeper. It's a presence, a gentle, embracing energy that doesn't need to make an announcement to be felt. It simply is, and it fills you in a way that nothing else can. It's the way your spiritual guide, your angel, holds you. This presence doesn't remove the burden from your shoulders, but it makes it lighter. It doesn't take you out of the experience, but it walks beside you through it. And you feel it. You recognize it. Because in the middle of a moment that would normally overwhelm you, something keeps you grounded. Something keeps you centered, present, and somehow anchored to a part of yourself that you didn't even know existed. That center you've discovered, it's not just yours. It's shared. It's a sacred space, an energetic meeting point where your soul connects with its guide. There are no words exchanged, no promises made, just a deep, silent assurance that somehow, in some way, everything will be okay, even if you have no idea how that could possibly be. Sometimes this peace shows up only after you've completely surrendered, after you've run out of options, after your strength is gone, after your mind has stopped trying to control what it cannot. And instead of spiraling into despair, you find yourself breathing deeply, seeing things with a new clarity that you didn't expect. That clarity, that breath, that peace, it isn't coming from you alone. It's your angels surrounding you with a different frequency. It's tuning your being into a realm where fear loses its grip, where the only vibration strong enough to remain is trust. A trust you didn't learn, but one that was given to you. And when that peace enters you, you don't need to analyze it. You don't need to explain it or even understand it. You simply allow yourself to be filled by it. Because even if your mind still doesn't have the answers, your soul has already been touched by something far greater than anything you can explain. Something that holds you, not through logic, not through thought, but through a deeper, wiser, more loving vibration. Sometimes this feeling of serenity comes with an inner stillness, a sacred pause that you couldn't achieve on your own, no matter how much you tried. You're not running from the problem. You're not pretending it doesn't hurt. You're being held, supported from a realm you cannot see, yet surrounds you with a pure intention. Don't break. Remember your center. This is one of the most subtle and beautiful ways your angel speaks to you. They don't have to appear before your eyes to make their presence known. They do it through silence, the kind that makes room for breath, for stability, for listening. Because without that silence, you'd miss the message beneath the noise. And in those moments, something inside you finds balance. What once felt like a chaotic storm now feels manageable. Not because the chaos disappeared, but because you have changed. Your internal state has shifted. Your field has been touched by a higher energy, and everything that this energy touches begins to rearrange itself in a new, more harmonious way. This is not some external miracle swooping in to fix things. It's a loving presence, awakening the strength already within you. It's reminding you of the power that lives inside you, the part of you that fear made you forget. And after living through something like that, after feeling that inexplicable peace, you know it wasn't just in your head. You know something or someone was with you. And even if you can't describe it perfectly, even if the words never come out quite right, there's a mark left on your chest, a vibration that lingers, a wordless whisper that somehow told you without ever speaking a word, I'm with you. The fourth sign is when you begin to notice an unusual energetic sensitivity when you're in certain places or near certain people. Your perception becomes sharper, more refined, as if your body were functioning like a spiritual radar. Without any clear reason, you feel peace in places where you never had before, or discomfort in spaces that seem completely normal. It's not something you can explain rationally. It's something you just know. Your intuition activates without asking for permission. And it happens because your spiritual guide is helping you refine your field, helping you recognize which energies strengthen you and which ones drain you. This connection doesn't give you concrete instructions. It offers perception, a sensitivity that doesn't come from thought, but from alignment with more subtle realms. Your body starts reacting differently. There are places where you can breathe more deeply, and people who make you feel at ease, as if something invisible is affirming you, telling you, yes, this is right. And then there are other times when your energy contracts without any clear reason. You just know you're not supposed to stay there. That invisible guidance isn't here to impose limits, but to help you recognize for yourself what resonates with your path and what no longer vibrates with you. What you used to tolerate without thinking now feels heavy. What once went unnoticed now hits you strongly. And that shift isn't random. It's a response to the subtle presence of your angel, who, without words or visible signs, is training you to listen more with your soul than with your senses. This sensitivity isn't a burden, it's a tool, And it's one of the most delicate, yet powerful ways in which the spiritual world teaches you how to protect your energy and walk with more clarity, more lightness, more truth. At first, this new sensitivity may confuse you. You ask yourself why you feel exhausted in certain places, why some people make you feel uneasy, even though they haven't done anything noticeable. But over time, you understand that it's not judgment, it's perception. Your energy system is beginning to respond with greater accuracy to what your soul already knew, long before you did. Your spiritual angel isn't here to change your environment. They're here to prepare you to move through it with greater awareness. They do so not by changing what you see, but by refining what you feel. Every time you pay attention to that subtle language, you strengthen the connection. Every time you honor what you perceive, the guidance becomes clearer. You don't need external signs to confirm what you already know within. But when you ignore it, something inside you dims. When you listen, something inside you expands. And that expansion shows up in simple but powerful choices. You step away from what disturbs your peace, even if you can't explain why. You gravitate toward what nourishes your energy, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else. You begin to choose with your soul, not your mind. And each choice, guided by that sensitivity, brings you closer to your truth. That's a quiet, yet constant way your spiritual angel walks with you, not by solving things for you, but by teaching you to feel from a higher plane. And when you learn to trust that perception, life begins to organize itself around what truly resonates with you, without effort, without explanation, just from the coherence of your highest frequency. That coherence begins to show in everything you do. Without realizing it, you change the way you speak, the kinds of conversations you're willing to have, even the silences you choose to respect. You're no longer interested in what's superficial because your refined energy starts seeking depth in everything. Your angel doesn't tell you what to do. They help you remember what you already knew, but had forgotten under the weight of the noise. And as you respond to that guidance, your inner world finds order. You no longer need external validation, because there is an inner clarity that grows every time you honor what you feel. That energetic sensitivity doesn't just protect you, it also connects you with other souls who vibrate like you do. You start crossing paths with people who understand you without the need for explanations, who sense the invisible the same way you do. And suddenly, you no longer feel strange, or alone, or out of place. Because when a soul starts listening to its field and allows itself to be guided by the unseen, life changes its tone entirely. Everything becomes softer, clearer, truer. Your spiritual angel doesn't walk ahead of you, they walk beside you. And every time you choose to honor that sensitivity you've been given, you strengthen that bond. A bond that isn't measured in words, but in vibration, and one that stays with you, even when you don't think about it, even when you forget. Because in the most subtle realms, love doesn't need to be remembered in order to remain. The fifth sign appears when you begin to feel a profound connection with something greater while you're in silence. It's not just the absence of noise, it's a presence that emerges the moment you stop doing, when the outside world dims for a while and something within you starts to awaken. It can happen when you're alone, surrounded by nature, or even during a brief pause in your daily routine. Suddenly, without seeking it, a soft warmth fills your being. There are no thoughts, no explanations, just a feeling of completeness that doesn't come from anything you can see. That sensation isn't created solely by you. It's your spiritual angel drawing near. It's their way of saying, "I'm here," in the space that appears when you allow yourself to pause. In that state, time seems to stop. Your breath shifts. Your mind calms. And for a moment, you feel that everything is exactly where it's meant to be. There's no need for anything to get better. Nothing is missing. Nothing is extra. You're simply present, entirely whole. In those moments, the bond becomes clearer, more tangible. Not because something extraordinary happens, but precisely because nothing does. And in that emptiness, full of presence, the connection deepens. Your spiritual angel doesn't need to speak to be heard. They communicate with your soul through silence, because only there can they reach what words can't touch. And when you learn to dwell in that space with humility, without demands or expectations, their guidance becomes more constant, more luminous, more yours. It's not about meditating or forcing a state of awareness. It's about opening your heart to what's already there, waiting to be seen, without noise, without haste, with reverence. Because in truth, that silent peace isn't something that comes from you. It comes toward you. And each time you allow yourself to step into that space, you're saying yes. Yes to the connection. Yes to the guidance. Yes to the invisible love that's been with you long before you knew how to name it. That yes you give in silence doesn't need to be spoken. It's an opening that's felt more than thought, a kind of energetic agreement your soul instantly recognizes. And every time you do it, every time you surrender to that stillness, the bond grows stronger. Not because the presence increases, but because you become more able to perceive it. There are days when closing your eyes for just a few seconds is enough, and you feel that connection once again. There's no need to ask, to seek, or to understand. You just have to be there, in what's already happening, effortlessly, because your communication with your angel isn't something you build, it's something you remember. And in the silence, you remember everything. The mind may forget, the body may doubt, but your energy knows. It knows that this presence is real, that the whisper isn't imagination, that this moment of stillness isn't emptiness, it's communion. And from there, without needing external signs, you begin to feel guided in all things, not because life becomes easier, but because you become deeper, more connected to your essence, more attuned to the frequency of what's walking with you. Silence transforms into wordless prayer, into a bridge between realms, into a space where the divine doesn't appear as something distant, but as something that lives in you, through you, beside you. And it is there, in the simplest things, where the most sacred truths are revealed. Your spiritual angel doesn't need grand signs to speak to you. They just need you to learn how to listen when no one else is listening. Sixth sign. You begin to notice that your thoughts, emotions, or words are gently redirected towards something more aligned, without knowing exactly how it happens. You're about to say something that doesn't resonate with you, and you stop. You're about to make a decision based on fear, but something within you, without clear reason, nudges you to wait. There is no external voice, no clear instruction, but an internal pause shifts your direction. That isn't random. It's subtle intervention. It's your spiritual angel influencing your mental frequency, not to control you, but to remind you of your center. You start noticing that thoughts which used to dominate you now lose their grip quickly, as if a deeper current were correcting your path without any effort on your part. You're aware. And it doesn't feel like control. It feels like guidance. A guidance that protects you, tunes you, doesn't interfere, but brings you back again and again to your truth. There are days when you notice you're acting with more compassion, more patience, more presence, without having planned it. It simply emerges as if a higher part of you, constantly connected to your angel, takes the lead gently for a few moments. That influence doesn't override your will. It elevates it. It reminds you of who you are when you're not caught up in the noise. It brings you back to your original frequency, not through effort, but with subtlety. And the more you allow yourself to follow that flow, the more natural it becomes. Your energy adjusts, your words grow more thoughtful, your presence more aware, because that connection isn't trying to change you from the outside. It's helping you remember who you are from the inside. And when you start living from that place, from that cleaner frequency, everything around you begins to respond differently. The situations that used to disturb you no longer hold the same power over you. Not because you've developed a mental strategy, but because something greater is acting with you, surrounding you, guiding you. You realize that this gentle redirection doesn't happen just once. It happens constantly. In the small gestures, in the fleeting thoughts, you now choose not to feed. In the way you now choose to respond instead of react. And it's not always you making that shift consciously. There's something beside you, holding your field when you can't, reminding you again and again that your soul knows the way. Your spiritual angel isn't here to correct you. It's here to help you remember. And it does so without punishment, without guilt, with immense sweetness, as if everything about it were made of infinite patience. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand. You're simply met at the exact point where your energy begins to soften and your awareness opens to reunion. It's like an inner dance. Sometimes you step in the wrong direction, and something soft, almost imperceptible, brings you back, not with force, but with a whisper, not with fear, but with truth. And once you've felt that movement more than once, when you recognize that presence surrounding you silently, you no longer doubt. You know you're not thinking differently by chance. You know you're not healing alone. There is something, someone, walking with you from the most subtle plane, simply to remind you that you don't have to do it all alone, simply to return you, again and again, to what you truly are. The seventh sign appears when you begin to feel a deep sense of gratitude that arises without any apparent reason. It's not the kind of gratitude that comes when things go well, nor the one you feel after receiving something you were hoping for. This is a quiet gratitude, with no external trigger. Something within you suddenly opens up and says thank you, without words, without logical reason, without needing anything more. This kind of gratitude doesn't come from the mind. It isn't a thought or something you construct. It's a vibration, flowing from the soul, awakened by a loving presence that gently surrounds you. And that presence is your spiritual angel. It shows up in the middle of everyday life. A walk, a glance at the sky, a moment where the world pauses just long enough for you to feel that everything makes sense, even if you can't explain it. And in that moment, all that emerges is a breath, a warm sensation that radiates from the center of your chest through your entire being. You don't need to be at peace to feel it. Sometimes it shows up during hard times, when everything feels uncertain, and yet something within you lights up, as if part of you knows that despite it all, you are being held, guided, and loved from a place you cannot see. But you can feel it as real as anything else in this life. This kind of gratitude asks for nothing. It just expresses itself. And when it does, it transforms you. Your eyes soften, your heart expands, and you understand that this feeling doesn't come from anything you've achieved, but from something you're remembering, that you're not alone, that you never were. And that gratitude starts to shift your energy without you needing to do anything at all. It's not an action, it's a state, a silent openness to the unseen, a way of telling the spiritual world, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm ready. No matter what you're facing on the outside, when that gratitude appears, it transforms everything from within. What was heavy becomes lighter. What was confusing becomes clearer. What was painful becomes more bearable. Because the presence of your spiritual angel doesn't erase the process, but it illuminates it. And in that gentle, subtle, quiet light, a form of thankfulness is born, one that has no cause, because it's older than any circumstance. Over time, this gratitude becomes constant. It begins to walk with you, even through the unexpected. It doesn't remove pain, but it reminds you that you're not falling alone, that there's an invisible net holding you, a whisper with every step, a frequency that wraps around everything, even when you don't realize it. And that frequency is love, not romantic or emotional love, but love as pure energy, as protective consciousness, as eternal presence. Gratitude then becomes the language you begin to use to communicate. You don't need to ask. You don't need to understand. Just give thanks from that inner space where the soul recognizes guidance and honors it, without noise, without spectacle. Just you, your angel, and that sacred bond that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Not every message arrives with words. Some arrive as calm, as intuition, as gratitude that rises for no reason. And when you start to feel all of that, it's not that something new is happening, it's that you're finally listening. Your spiritual angel doesn't speak from outside. It reminds you from within. And now that you recognize it, the bond becomes impossible to deny. If this message resonated deep within you, if you felt something light up while you were listening, don't ignore it. It's your soul responding to a truth that has always been there. Subscribe to Whispers of the Soul. Keep walking this path of connection, awareness, and light. You didn't come here to learn something new. You came to remember what your soul already knew.